So we talked about our consumer base, talked a little bit about environmental factors, and then we talk a little bit about the market itself. So, KPIs you've probably heard before, and you'll hear it again and again and again in many of your business courses. And, metrics that we use and measurement so that we know. So now, this chapter in these terms are basic terms. When you look at the STAR report, we talk about indexes, you're going to see all this stuff. So ADR, occupancy, and again, when we look at average daily rate, I think the important thing for you to look at if you wanted to underline something here would be rooms occupied. So not the total rooms that are occupied, right? And then, occupancy is exactly what it sounds like. We have 100 rooms, 75 people are staying in those rooms tonight, or 75 rooms are being used tonight, so 75% occupancy. Comp rooms usually aren't included in occupancy. When you look at the STAR data videos, and for the purposes of assignments, we don't worry about complimentary. You assume that everyone's paying for the rooms that they're in. We're not going to try to trick you and throw you up there. So we'll keep it basic. Revenue per available room, revenue per occupied room, and then gross operating profit. We will go as far as RevPAR and the STAR report stuff that you're going to see. Don't worry about RevPAR or GoPAR. It's not that they're not important, but I don't want you to worry about that for this course. Comp set, you'll hear us talk about this a lot. So it's important to understand that you have yourself, your property, your hotel, and then your comp set, right? Who are the folks that are very, very similar to you, and you can base your performance on what they do. And that's where the STAR report is phenomenal. And you'll learn more about that in those modules that we have set up for you there. So comp set's very important. And then some other things that you've seen that you know about market segment. You want to know that they share the same characteristics, so we can start to make inferences or assumptions about them. Pace reports, rack room rates, and then RevPASH. Again, don't worry about RevPASH. Don't really worry about pace report from a standpoint of the STAR report assignment. Not to say stuff's not important, but for the case of that, I wouldn't worry about it too much. Rack room rate, the max advertised rate. Perfect world, that's what we want to get all the time. So again, talked about external factors, competitors, economic impacts, trends, changing customer demographics. So you start to see just how detailed this role is as a revenue manager, all the things that you need to look at to successfully determine, right price, right time, all that stuff that we kind of mentioned before. So then KPIs. So the market penetration index is how we compare to the market. So again, as I skirt over these in this summary that I'm going to give you, remember that the STAR report section that you look at really, really, really hammers home what these things mean. But generally speaking, and you'll look at the formulas, less than 1 is not getting your fair share. 1 is exactly your fair share, and over 1 means you're doing better than your competitors in your comp set. So that's kind of, when we're looking at these things, how we want to base it. And so when you figure out those percentages, you can see the math right there. 0.97, just a little bit under 1, so not quite as good as our competitors in the market, our comp set. So the average rate, we do the exact same thing. So in this case, when you're looking here, you're going to say you're over 1, you've got more than your fair share. What's important to know, and this is when we're talking about looking at STAR report data, is overall in our big indexes, our big 3, how are we doing? Okay, if they're all over 1, great. If they're not, we want to look at that and say, okay, well, this one's really good, and this one's below 1, so what are some things we might be able to do to maybe move the needle in our favor on that? So that's kind of what we're looking at. We already looked at what average rate is. Revenue generation index, again, same thing. So in the case of this property, we are over the fair share for the competitive set. It's over 1.03. It's not a lot over 1, but it's over 1 and it's not under 1. So that becomes something where it's like, okay, we are getting more than our fair share of revenue. So RevPAR, to me, and you'll see this on the STAR report, not just to me, RevPAR is a biggie. So always remember that. And again, I tell you, the STAR report videos, if you haven't seen those yet, it's a lot of stuff, but it's explained very, very well by Dr. Ricci, and it's important. Again, beyond the bottom line thinking, top line, how are we doing? Look, if we take a snapshot of our property and our property's doing great, that's fantastic. But what about everybody else around us? How are we comparing with them? So that's what we really want to look at. And again, RGI, like we just talked about, that has to do with RevPAR because it's both. You've got rate and occupancy. So we want to make sure we're doing well on all fronts, for lack of a better word, if we can. So the comp set, STAR, STR Global, you look at this and everybody puts their information in there, most everybody, so that we can see similar things. And when you start to talk about comp sets, we're talking about taking it by, I'll use an example, not just the city of Atlanta, but Southwest Atlanta near the airport. And I don't even know if that's accurate, but you understand what I'm saying. Taking the bigger group, shrinking it down even more so that this quote unquote area of properties is what we're really looking at to compare. Getting as fine tooth as we can. SWOT analysis we talked about. Again, favorable, unfavorable. I can't stress enough that, and you've heard SWOT and you're probably like, oh my God, if I hear SWOT analysis in another class, but that's because it's important. We do this really well. We really need to work on this. And here are some areas where I think we can really do well. And here are some things that prevent us from doing as well as we'd like to do in a nutshell. Right? So that's what we kind of start looking at to say, what do we do, right? Objective is attainable because objective means nothing if we can't reach the objective. So we go back and we look at something else. So again, areas for development. We talked about this in other presentations that I've given. Don't ever rest. Oh, everything's going great. We're doing this, we're doing that. Well, you can always improve. Maybe just a little bit, but you can do it. So thinking of ways where you say to yourself, like, you know, this is good, but we can do better, to quote Celine Dion, which I hope I never do again. But, you know, looking inwardly, strengths, like we said, and then looking externally. And it's perfectly fine for you to realize, look, when I was in industry, there were some things that I knew that we did very well as an organization, depending on the organization I was working for at the time. But there were some things that our competitors did that, just quite frankly, were better. It's okay to admit that. But looking at value propositions, right? So, and in certain cases, it may not be feasible for you to do what they're doing. You can't do it. Expense wise, or they have, you know, whatever the case may be, you can't do it. So don't try. You know, it's, you know, if you can be one thing to a market and be sustainable and be profitable, and you try to overstretch and go to another market, why would you do that? So again, price value matrix, again, what do the customers say is important? There's some things that we think are important. That's good. What do our customers think is important? Okay. So we're going to get feedback from them as much as we can. If that's a focus group, if it's a questionnaire, if it's whatever the case may be, social media, figuring out what they think. And then the value itself. ranking to see how they do, review that and see based on all these different things what they think. And then distribution channels. Now, I mean, places that you go to look, as I had said previously, the last place that you may look may actually be the website for the property you're thinking about staying at. But it can still happen that way. But again, how you sell your inventory through all these different venues and relationships that you have with people to host that, you know, like convention and visitors bureaus, alliances, hotels.com, just all these various options that are out there for you to sell rooms. Appropriate channels, obviously the right message, and that, you know, if you get lost in the shuffle, you're not going to be successful. So messaging is key. There's that, you know, static, and we try as best we can to eliminate that static, because everyone that's listening to this, you can plug in any product or service or anything you're trying to do. If it becomes work for us in our minds, we're done with it and we're not going to do it. And so that communication to our customer segment has to be efficient, very clearly stated. I don't necessarily say simple, probably as easy as it possibly can be, and keeping that consistent message for the product. So, you know, it's a lot. And you've already seen from these other sections that there's a lot of moving pieces to this, but that's revenue management.